How does a father realize he has already been written out of his own family? Why does a birthday silence hurt more than open cruelty? And what happens when a man finally stops paying to be disrespected? My name is Robert Hale, and I turned 58 years old on a Tuesday in March. I'm a widowed father of one son. I spent 32 years working as an electrician and maintenance supervisor before I retired 3 years ago. I own my house outright, paid off the mortgage 2 years before my wife passed. I live alone now, and most days that's fine. Most days I don't mind the quiet, but birthdays are different. I woke up that morning the same way I always do, 6:15, no alarm needed. My body just knows. I made coffee in the same pot I've used for 12 years, sat at the same kitchen table, looked at the same empty chair across from me, the chair where my wife used to sit, the chair where my son used to sit when he still lived here. Daniel moved out when he was 24, got married at 28. He's 31 now, and sometimes I realize weeks go by without us talking. Not because we fought, not because anything specific happened, just because he got busy, I suppose. Busy with his life, his wife, his plans. I drank my coffee black and ate 2 pieces of toast with butter. The kitchen was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. I checked my phone 3 times during breakfast. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. It was fine. He's a grown man. He has responsibilities. Maybe he'd call later. I spent the morning doing what I always do on my days. Laundry, a little yard work, organizing the garage. I found an old toolbox in the back corner that I hadn't opened in years. Inside were some electrical connectors I'd saved from job sites, a few rolls of wire, some cable ties, things I thought I might need someday. I closed the box and put it back. Around 11, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I made myself a sandwich for lunch, ham and cheese on wheat bread. I ate it standing at the counter, looking out the window at the neighbor's yard. Thomas Reed was out there trimming his hedges. He's 61, retired from the post office. We wave to each other sometimes, but don't talk much. He looked up once, saw me in the window, nodded. I nodded back. The afternoon stretched out long and empty. I tried watching television but couldn't focus. I kept glancing at my phone on the coffee table. The screen stayed dark. By 3 o'clock, I accepted that he wasn't going to call, not yet anyway. Maybe he was planning to call tonight. Maybe he'd just forgotten what day it was. People forget things. It happens. I thought about the last few birthdays. 3 years ago, my wife was still alive. She made a cake. Chocolate with vanilla frosting, my favorite. Daniel came over with Melissa, his wife. We ate dinner together, opened a bottle of wine, talked about nothing important. It was nice. 2 years ago, the first birthday after my wife passed, Daniel called in the morning. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. He said he was sorry he couldn't come by, that work was crazy. He'd make it up to me soon, he said. We'd get dinner sometime. Last year, he texted. Just a short message. Happy birthday, Dad. Hope you have a good one. I responded with thanks. He didn't reply after that. This year, nothing. I sat in the living room as the light outside started to fade. The house felt bigger when it was getting dark. More rooms, more empty space, more silence pressing in from all sides. I used to fill this space. My wife and I, we made noise. We talked, we laughed, we argued sometimes. We were alive in here. Now it was just me and the quiet. I made dinner around 6. Grilled chicken breast, steamed broccoli, a baked potato. I ate at the table, phone next to my plate. Still nothing. After I finished, I washed the dishes by hand, even though I have a dishwasher. It gave me something to do. The warm water felt good on my hands. At 7:30, I sat down in my recliner with a book. I read the same page 4 times without absorbing a single word. My eyes kept drifting to my phone. 8 o'clock came and went. Then 9. At 9:45, I accepted that it wasn't going to happen. He'd forgotten, or he'd remembered and decided not to bother. Either way, the day was almost over, and my son hadn't acknowledged my birthday at all. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger exactly, not even hurt really, just a kind of heavy acceptance. This was how things were now. I was 58 years old, alone in my house, and my only child couldn't spare 5 minutes to send a text. I turned off the lamp and sat in the darkness for a while. The house made its settling noises around me, the creak of wood, the tick of cooling pipes, the distant hum of the water heater in the basement. Familiar sounds, comforting in their way. I was about to get up and go to bed when my phone lit up on the side table. The screen glowed blue in the dark room. I reached for it slowly, feeling something cold move through my chest. Maybe he'd remembered. Maybe he'd just been busy all day and was calling now to apologize, to wish me a happy birthday, to say he'd come by this weekend. I picked up the phone and looked at the screen. It was a text message from Daniel. I opened it. The message said, "Dad, I need to borrow $5,500. Can you send it tonight?" I stared at the screen for a long time, read it again, then again. No happy birthday, no sorry I didn't call, no explanation of what the money was for, just a request, direct and simple, like I was a bank and he was making a withdrawal. I scrolled up through our message history. The last text I'd sent him was 2 weeks ago. "How are you doing? Want to get lunch sometime?" He'd responded 6 hours later with, "Pretty busy right now. Maybe soon." Before that, 3 weeks earlier, I'd asked if he needed anything from the hardware store since I was going anyway. He'd said no. A month before that, I'd sent him a photo of his old Little League trophy I'd found while cleaning. He hadn't responded at all. Now, tonight, on my birthday, he needed money. I set the phone down on my lap and looked around the dark living room. I could barely make out the shapes of furniture. The couch where he used to watch cartoons on Saturday mornings. The bookshelf where his school photos used to sit before Melissa asked to take them for their apartment. The fireplace where we'd hang stockings at Christmas. All of it was still here. All these spaces where he used to be. I picked up the phone again and typed, "What do you need it for?" The response came back in less than a minute. "Does it matter? I need it." I sat with that for a while. Thought about all the times I'd given him money over the years. When he needed a security deposit for his first apartment, $2,000. When his car needed a new transmission, $1,800. When he and Melissa wanted to take a vacation to Mexico, $1,200, which they said they'd pay back, but never did. When they needed furniture for their living room, $900. When Melissa's sister was getting married and they needed new clothes for the wedding, $400. I'd never asked for any of it back, never kept a running total. He was my son. You help your children when they need it. That's what you do. But something about this felt different. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the fact that he'd gone all day without acknowledging my birthday and then showed up with his hand out. I thought about my wife. What would she say? She'd always been softer with Daniel than I was. More willing to excuse things, to give second chances, to see the good in his choices even when I had doubts. When Daniel started dating Melissa, I'd noticed how Melissa talked to him sometimes. Sharp little comments, corrections, suggestions that sounded like orders. My wife said I was being overprotective. "Young couples figure things out," she said. "Give them space." After we got married, Melissa started making more decisions. Where they'd live, what furniture they'd buy, how they'd spend their time. Daniel seemed to just go along with it. When I mentioned this to my wife, she said, "That's how some marriages work. Everyone finds their balance." But I'd seen the change. The way Daniel started checking his phone more when we'd have dinner together. The way conversations got shorter. the way visits became less frequent, and after my wife passed, it got worse. Like without her as the connection point, Daniel didn't quite know what to do with me. Melissa never called me by my name. It was always Daniel's dad when she talked about me, even to my face, like I didn't exist as a person outside of my relationship to him. At family gatherings, she'd position herself between Daniel and me, literally stepping into conversations, redirecting topics, pulling him away when he'd been talking to me for more than a few minutes. I'd watched my son disappear bit by bit into her orbit, and now here he was, asking for $5,500 on my birthday without so much as acknowledging the day. I opened my banking app and checked my balance. I had the money. That wasn't the issue. I'd been careful over the years, saved what I could, lived modestly. My pension covered my basic needs, and I had some money set aside for emergencies or home repairs or medical expenses down the road. I could afford to give him what he was asking for. The question was whether I should. I typed, "It's my birthday today." 3 minutes passed. Then, "I know, happy birthday. Can you send the money?" I read that over and over. I know. He knew. He'd known all day. He'd chosen not to say anything until he needed something from me. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could type out so many things. I could ask him why he didn't call. I could ask him why this money suddenly became urgent tonight. I could ask him if he even remembered the last time we had a real conversation. I could ask him when I became just a wallet to him. But I didn't type any of those things. Instead, I closed the banking app and opened it again. Went through the steps to send money. Entered Daniel's name. Watched the system pull up his account information from previous transfers. In the amount field, I typed 0.01, 1 cent. I added a message, "Happy birthday." Then I hit send. The confirmation screen appeared. Transaction complete. 1 cent transferred to Daniel Hale. I set the phone face down on the side table and sat in the dark. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. The click of the send button, the confirmation screen, the 1 cent transaction sitting there in the system, permanent and unchangeable. Part of me waited for the panic to hit, the regret, the urge to call him and explain it was a mistake, that I'd send the real amount in the morning. But that feeling never came. Instead, I felt something else. Something quieter, but stronger. A kind of clarity. I'd drawn a line. Maybe not a loud one, not a dramatic one, but a line nonetheless. My phone buzzed twice during the night. I didn't check it. I knew what it would say. Confusion, probably. Then anger. Demands for an explanation. Maybe insults. But I didn't need to see any of it right then. The line was drawn. The rest could wait until morning. I finally fell asleep around 4 and woke up at 6:15 like always. Made my coffee, sat at the kitchen table, felt the familiar quiet of the house around me. But it was different now. Lighter somehow. Like something heavy had been set down. I checked my phone over breakfast. 8 messages from Daniel. I read through them slowly. The first, "Are you serious right now?" The second, "This is a joke, right?" The third, "Dad, I actually need the money. Send the real amount." The fourth, "Why are you being like this?" The fifth, "I don't have time for games. I need that money today." The sixth, "You're really going to do this to me?" The seventh, "Fine, whatever. I'll figure it out myself like I always do." The eighth, "Melissa says you're being childish." I set the phone down and finished my coffee. Then I got up, rinsed my cup, and went out to the garage. The garage was attached to the house through a door in the kitchen. It was a 2-car space, but I only had one vehicle, a 12-year-old pickup truck I'd bought used when I was still working. The rest of the space was storage, shelves lined with boxes of old tools, holiday decorations, paint cans, things I'd accumulated over 30-plus years of home ownership. I found what I was looking for on a shelf near the back, a small cardboard box labeled keys in my wife's handwriting. I opened it and sorted through the contents. House keys on various rings. A key to my father's old house that I'd never gotten rid of, even though he'd been gone for 10 years. A key to a storage unit I'd rented once and forgotten about. And there, at the bottom, 2 keys that made my chest tighten. Copies of my house key. One I'd given to Daniel when he was 16, so he could come and go without needing someone home to let him in. One I'd given him again when he moved out. Just in case, I'd said. In case he ever needed a place to stay, in case of emergency, in case he just wanted to stop by. He'd never used them as far as I knew. Never stopped by unannounced, never came over just to say hello. But he had them. Somewhere in his apartment, in a drawer or on a hook, he had keys to my house, and that suddenly felt wrong. I closed the box and put it back on the shelf. Then I got in my truck and drove to the hardware store. The place was busy for a Wednesday morning. Contractors loading up on supplies, homeowners picking up weekend project materials, retirees like me browsing the aisles with no particular hurry. I walked to the lock section and spent 15 minutes comparing options. I settled on a good solid deadbolt with a new key configuration, the kind you can't copy at a cheap machine. You need to order duplicates through the manufacturer. At the register, the young guy ringing me up made small talk. Upgrading your security? Something like that, I said. I drove home, parked in the garage, and carried the bag inside. The installation instructions said it would take about 30 minutes. I cleared the kitchen table and laid out all the parts and tools I'd need. Then I went to the front door. The old lock had been there since before my wife passed. I remembered the day we'd installed it, 23 years ago, right after Daniel turned 8. We'd been having trouble with the previous lock sticking, and I'd replaced the whole mechanism while my wife held the door steady and Daniel watched, asking questions about how it all worked. I put a hand on the door frame and stood there for a moment. Then I got to work. The old lock came out easily enough, a few screws, some wiggling, and the whole assembly pulled free. I set it aside and looked at the hole it left behind, just empty space where something used to be. The new lock went in smoothly. I took my time, made sure everything was level, tested the mechanism several times. When I was finished, I stood back and looked at it, shiny and new, different, not better, not worse, just different. I locked it from the inside, then opened the door and tested the new keys from the outside. Perfect fit, smooth action. I went back inside, locked the door again, and put one key on my regular key ring. The other 2 keys that came with the set, I put in my wallet. Then I gathered up the old lock, the packaging from the new one, and took it all out to the garage. I threw the packaging in the recycling bin. The old lock, I put in the box with the other keys. Buried it under the old copies Daniel would never use now. When I came back inside, the house felt different. Not bigger or smaller. Just more definitively mine. I made myself lunch and ate it at the table where I'd laid out the lock parts an hour earlier. My phone buzzed a few more times. I glanced at it but didn't pick it up. The line was still there, still holding. Around 2 in the afternoon, I took a walk around the neighborhood. It was a nice day, cool but sunny, that particular quality of light you only get in March. I walked past Thomas Reed's house. He was out front, pulling weeds from his flower bed. He straightened up when he saw me. "Afternoon, Robert." "Thomas." He wiped his hands on his jeans. "Saw you working on your door this morning. Everything okay?" "Just updating some things," I said. He nodded slowly. "Good idea. Can't be too careful these days." We stood there for a moment in that comfortable silence that exists between people who've lived next to each other for years without becoming close friends. Then he went back to his weeds and I continued my walk. When I got home, I checked my phone properly for the first time since breakfast. 14 messages from Daniel now. The tone had shifted. Less confusion, more anger. "You can't just ignore me. I need to talk to you. Pick up your phone. This is ridiculous. I'm coming over." That last one was from 20 minutes ago. I looked out the front window. No car in the driveway yet. I went to the living room and sat in my recliner where I could see the street. I didn't have to wait long. Daniel's car pulled up to the curb at 3:45. I watched through the window as he got out, phone pressed to his ear. He was talking to someone, gesturing with his free hand. Probably Melissa. He glanced at the house, said something else into the phone, then hung up and shoved it in his pocket. He walked up the driveway with that particular stride he'd developed in the last few years. Purposeful, almost aggressive, like he was always heading into a negotiation he intended to win. He'd gotten that from Melissa, I thought. Before her, he'd been more easygoing, slower to anger, less certain that the world should bend to his wants. He reached the front door and tried the handle. Locked, of course. Then he knocked. 3 sharp raps. I stayed in my chair. He knocked again, harder this time. "Dad, I know you're in there. Your truck's in the garage." I could hear him clearly through the door. The house wasn't that big, and I'd built these walls myself years ago. Good insulation, but sound still carried. "Dad, come on. Open the door. We need to talk." I stayed where I was. A pause. Then the sound of keys jingling. He was getting out his copy of my house key. I heard it slide into the lock, heard him try to turn it. Nothing happened. He tried again, jiggled the key, pulled it out, put it back in. I could picture his face, confusion first, then frustration. "Dad, what the heck? Did you change the locks?" I didn't answer. "Are you kidding me right now? You actually changed the locks?" More jiggling. More frustrated attempts to make an old key work in a new lock. Then silence. He was probably texting Melissa, I thought, telling her what was happening, getting her input on what to do next. After a minute, he started knocking again. "Dad, this is insane. Open the door. What is wrong with you?" I sat very still. "Fine," he said finally. "Fine. You want to play games? We'll play games. But you're going to regret this. I'm your son. You can't just lock me out of your house. That's not how this works." Footsteps receding down the walkway. A car door opening and slamming shut, the engine starting. The sound of him driving away. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My phone started ringing almost immediately. I looked at the screen. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Then the texts started coming rapid fire. "Pick up the phone. I'm not playing around. You're being ridiculous. Mom would be ashamed of you right now." That last one made something hot flash through my chest, using his mother like that, using my dead wife as a weapon in whatever this was. I set the phone face down on the side table and got up. Went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea even though I didn't particularly want one. I just needed to move, to do something with my hands. The phone kept buzzing on the table in the other room, on and on and on. I took my tea and went out the back door to the small patio I'd built the summer after my wife passed. It was just a simple concrete slab with a couple of chairs and a small table, but it faced the backyard and got good afternoon light. I sat down and looked at the grass. It needed mowing. I'd do that this weekend. Birds were moving through the trees at the edge of the property, sparrows mostly, and a couple of crows. I watched them hop from branch to branch, calling to each other in their sharp voices. Simple creatures with simple needs: food, shelter, safety. They didn't complicate things. I stayed out there for an hour. The sun moved lower, the shadows got longer, and the air took on that particular chill that comes in March evenings. When I finally went back inside, my phone had stopped buzzing. I picked it up and scrolled through the messages, 37 in total. I didn't read most of them, just caught fragments, anger, accusations, demands, and then, near the end, a shift in tone. "Dad, seriously, I need that money. This isn't a joke. I'm in trouble. Please, just call me back. I'm sorry about your birthday, okay? I should have called. I messed up. Can we talk?" I set the phone down and made dinner. Spaghetti with sauce from a jar and a side salad. I ate slowly, chewing each bite thoroughly, tasting nothing. After dinner, I washed the dishes and checked my phone one more time. One new message from Daniel, sent 20 minutes ago. Melissa says we should get a lawyer. I don't want to do that. Just give me my key and send the money and we can forget this happened. I read it twice. My key. Not a key to your house. Not the spare key. My key. Like it was his property. Like access to my house was something he owned. I opened a new message and typed, "This is my house. I can change the locks if I want to." His response came fast. "You're really going to be like this?" I didn't reply. 10 minutes later. "Fine. I'm coming back tomorrow with Melissa. We're going to settle this." I turned off my phone and went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I lay in the darkness thinking about Daniel as a child, the way he used to follow me around when I was working on projects, handing me tools, asking endless questions, the way he'd run to the door when I got home from work, excited to tell me about his day, the way he'd crawl into bed between my wife and me on Saturday mornings, warm and small and entirely trusting. When had that changed? When had I become just an obstacle to him, a source of money and occasional inconvenience? Maybe it had been gradual, so slow I didn't notice until it was already done. Or maybe there'd been a specific moment, a specific choice, a specific turning point that I'd missed entirely. Either way, here we were. My son on one side of a locked door, me on the other, and no clear path back to whatever we'd been before. I thought about my wife again, wondered what she'd say, whether she'd tell me I was being too hard on him, whether she'd see what I was seeing or whether she'd explain it away like she'd always done, whether I was doing the right thing or just being stubborn and proud. I didn't have answers to any of it. All I had was the locked door and the 1-cent transaction and the quiet house around me. Around 3 a.m, I got up and went to the window, looked out at the street, empty, silent, just the orange glow of streetlights and the dark shapes of houses. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably awake too, angry, planning, convinced he was right and I was wrong. Let him plan, I thought. Let him be angry. The lock was changed, the line was drawn, and I wasn't moving it. They came at 10 the next morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the car pull up. I looked out the window and saw Daniel's sedan in the driveway. Both front doors opened. Daniel got out first, then Melissa. I'd seen her at family gatherings, at their wedding, at a few dinners over the years. She was 29, thin, always dressed carefully, the kind of person who made you aware of being looked at and judged. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and was wearing expensive-looking sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. They walked up to the front door together. Melissa stayed slightly behind Daniel, but close enough that I could tell she was the one running this show. He knocked, 3 times, evenly spaced. I stayed in the kitchen. "Dad, open up. I've got Melissa with me. We need to talk." Silence. "Come on, don't make this weird. We're just here to have a conversation." I poured my coffee slowly, listening. "Robert," Melissa called out. She never called me anything else. Not Dad, not Mr. Hale, just Robert, with that particular edge that made my name sound like a mild accusation. "We know you're in there. This is childish. Open the door." I took a sip of coffee. It was too hot. I set it down to cool. Daniel again. "I'm serious, Dad. If you don't open this door right now, we're going to have problems. Real problems." "He can't just lock us out," Melissa said, not quite to Daniel, but loud enough for me to hear. "That's not legal. You have rights here." I walked to the living room and sat in my recliner where I could see the front door, but they couldn't see me through the windows. The angle was wrong for that. More knocking. Harder now. Then Melissa's voice, sharp and clear. "Robert, I'm not going to stand out here all day. You're being ridiculous and you know it. Daniel has been more than patient with you. He's overlooked a lot over the years. The least you can do is show him some basic respect." I almost laughed at that. Respect. From the woman who'd spent the last 3 years systematically erasing me from my son's life. "We're going to call the police," Daniel said. "I'm not joking. You can't just keep me out of your house." "It's his house," Melissa corrected. "But you have a legal right to access, especially since he's clearly not in his right mind. Changing the locks on your own son? That's not normal behavior." They conferred quietly for a moment. I couldn't make out the words. Then footsteps going back down the walkway, car doors opening but not closing. They were standing by the car now, probably trying to decide what to do next. I got up and went to the window, staying back far enough that they couldn't see me. Daniel had his phone out. Melissa was leaning against the car with her arms crossed, looking at the house with an expression I could read even from this distance. Contempt. Daniel made a call, put the phone to his ear, waited, started talking. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could guess. Calling the police, probably, or a lawyer, or both. Fine, let him call. This was my house, my name on the deed, my locks, my rules. They stood by the car for maybe 10 minutes. Then another vehicle pulled up, a police cruiser. One officer got out. He was maybe 42, average height, the kind of calm, professional demeanor that comes from doing this job for a long time. His nameplate said Grant. Daniel walked up to him immediately, talking fast, gesturing at the house. Melissa joined in. The officer listened, nodded occasionally, took out a notepad and wrote something down. Then he looked at the house. He walked up to the front door alone and knocked. "This is Officer Grant with the local police, looking for Robert Hale." I got up and went to the door, unlocked it but left the chain on, opened it the 3 inches the chain allowed. "Mr. Hale? That's me. I've got a complaint here from your son. Says you've changed the locks and won't let him in. Says he has a right to access the property." "This is my house," I said. "I own it. I can change the locks if I want to." "Is your son a resident here?" "No. He moved out 7 years ago. Lives across town with his wife." Officer Grant glanced back at Daniel and Melissa, then at me. "Does he have any belongings stored here? Any reason he'd need regular access?" "No." "Has there been any agreement, verbal or written, that gives him rights to access the property?" "No." The officer made another note. "And you're refusing him entry today because it's my house," I said, "and I don't want him here right now." Officer Grant studied me for a moment. Then he nodded. "Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hale. You can close the door now." I closed it, locked it, kept the chain on. Through the door, I heard Officer Grant walk back to Daniel and Melissa, heard the murmur of conversation, then Daniel's voice rising, "That's it? You're not going to do anything?" Officer Grant's voice, calm and level. "Sir, this is a civil matter, not a criminal one. Your father owns the property. He has the right to deny you access if you're not a resident and don't have a legal claim to be there. If you believe you have a legitimate dispute about property rights, you'll need to take it up with a lawyer. But he changed the locks, which is his right as the property owner." "This is unbelievable," Melissa said. "We came here in good faith to have a conversation, and he won't even open the door." "Ma'am, property owners have the right to refuse visitors. If you're concerned about his well-being, you can request a welfare check. But from what I can see, Mr. Hale is coherent and making his own decisions." More back and forth. Daniel getting angrier. Melissa's voice sharp and insistent. Officer Grant remaining calm, repeating variations of the same information. This was a civil matter. I owned the house. I had rights. They needed to leave if I asked them to. Finally, Officer Grant said, "I'm going to have to ask you both to leave the property now. If you refuse, I can charge you with trespassing." "Trespassing?" Daniel's voice cracked. "This is my father's house, and he's asking you to leave, so you need to go." A long silence. Then footsteps, car doors, engines starting, the sound of 2 vehicles driving away. I stayed by the door for a few minutes, listening to the silence return. Then I went back to the kitchen and finished my coffee. It had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. My phone rang. Daniel. I didn't answer. It rang again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Then a text. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. I set the phone down and looked around my kitchen. At the table where I ate my meals. At the window that looked out on the backyard. At the calendar on the wall with nothing written on it. At the clean counters and empty chairs and quiet corners. This was my space, my home, the place I'd worked for, paid for, maintained for over 30 years, and I was done apologizing for wanting to keep it mine. I spent the rest of the day doing ordinary things. I mowed the lawn, fixed a loose board on the back porch, organized some boxes in the garage. When Thomas Reed saw me outside, he walked over to the property line. Everything okay? Saw the police car this morning. Just a misunderstanding, I said. It's handled. He nodded slowly. Good, that's good. He paused, then added, You know, my son and I, we don't talk much either. Moved to California 15 years ago. Calls maybe twice a year. It's hard when they grow up and forget where they came from. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Anyway, Thomas said, You need anything? I'm right here. Thanks. He went back to his yard, and I went back to mine. That evening, I made a simple dinner and ate it while watching the news. Then I took a shower and got ready for bed. My phone had been quiet for hours. No calls, no texts. The silence felt earned. I was just turning off the lights when I heard something outside. A car engine, idling. I went to the window and looked out. Daniel's car was parked across the street. I could see him in the driver's seat, phone glowing in his hand, just sitting there, watching the house. I closed the curtains and went to bed. Daniel's car was gone by morning. I checked when I got up, peering through the curtains at the empty street. Part of me wondered if he'd stayed all night or if he'd just been there for an hour or two, trying to figure out his next move. I made breakfast, checked my phone. No new messages. That felt strange. After days of constant contact, the sudden silence was almost louder than the noise had been. I spent the morning doing what I usually did. Laundry, some reading, a few small repairs around the house, normal routine. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, that quiet before action, that held breath before impact. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Hale, this is Officer Grant. We spoke yesterday. I remember. I wanted to give you a courtesy call. Your son filed a formal trespassing complaint against himself this morning. I blinked. What? It's unusual, but he came into the station and insisted on making a report stating that he attempted to access your property yesterday without permission. He seems to think this will help him in some kind of legal action against you. I see. Mr. Hale, I want to be clear. This doesn't give him any additional rights to your property. If anything, it documents that he was aware he was asked to leave and came back anyway. I'm calling because I want to make sure you're aware of what he's trying to do, and to let you know that if he shows up at your property again and you want him removed, you have grounds to request that formally. Meaning you can file a restraining order if this becomes harassment. You can also press charges for trespassing if he refuses to leave when asked. Your property, your rules. I thanked him and hung up. Sat with that information for a while. Daniel was escalating, filing reports, building a case, trying to find some angle that would force me to bend. And it was all falling apart because the foundation he was building on, entitlement, assumptions, a son's supposed right to his father's property, didn't exist in law. My phone buzzed. Text from Daniel. The police called you, didn't they? I didn't respond. You can't hide forever. I know where you live. I set the phone down. An hour later, another text. Melissa's uncle is a lawyer. He says we have options. Still, I didn't respond. The afternoon dragged. I tried to focus on a book, but kept reading the same paragraphs over and over. The house felt smaller somehow, like the walls were closer together. I went outside just to get some air. Thomas was in his driveway washing his car. He waved. I waved back. Normal gestures, normal day. Except nothing felt normal. At 4:30, I saw a car I didn't recognize pull up in front of my house. Not Daniel's sedan. This was a newer model, silver, expensive looking. A woman got out from the driver's side. Melissa. The passenger door opened and Daniel emerged. They walked up to my door together. This time, Melissa knocked. "Robert, we need to talk. We've consulted with a lawyer and we have some information you need to hear." I stayed in the kitchen, out of sight. "Robert, I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to help you understand the situation you're putting yourself in. Daniel has rights, whether you want to acknowledge them or not. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but either way, we're going to resolve this." Daniel's voice quieter. "Dad, please, just let us in. 5 minutes. That's all we're asking." I looked at the door, at the new lock, at the barrier I'd put up and the line I'd drawn. Melissa again. "We're prepared to take legal action if necessary. Melissa's uncle has already drawn up paperwork. We can file tomorrow morning if we don't settle this today. Is that really what you want? Court, lawyers, public records of family disputes?" Silence. Then footsteps. They were leaving, but only to the end of the walkway. I heard Melissa on the phone. "Yes, he's refusing to open the door. I know. We're documenting everything." "Okay, we'll wait for you." They were calling someone. Probably the lawyer uncle, or maybe the police again. I went to the window and watched. They stood by the car, both on their phones now. Melissa was animated, gesturing as she talked. Daniel kept glancing at the house, then away, then back again. He looked smaller out there, younger, almost like the boy I used to know. Almost. 20 minutes passed. Then a third car arrived. A man got out, late 50s, gray hair, wearing a suit despite the casual day. He shook hands with Melissa, said something to Daniel, then looked at the house. The three of them talked for several minutes. The lawyer made notes on a pad. Melissa pointed at the house several times. Daniel mostly just stood there, hands in his pockets. Finally, the lawyer walked up to my door alone. He knocked once, firmly. "Mr. Hale, my name is Richard Foster. I'm an attorney representing your son and daughter-in-law. I'd like to speak with you about a resolution to this situation." I stayed where I was. "Mr. Hale, I understand you've changed the locks on your property. That's your right. However, your son believes he has stored personal items here that he needs to retrieve. We're prepared to schedule a supervised visit to collect those items, and then this matter can be closed." There were no items. Daniel had taken everything when he moved out years ago. This was just another angle. "Mr. Hale, if you refuse to cooperate, we'll have no choice but to pursue legal remedies. That will be expensive and time-consuming for everyone involved. I'm sure we can avoid that." I opened a window on the side of the house. Not the door, just a window in the living room that faced away from where they were standing. Called out, "There are no personal items here. He can't retrieve what doesn't exist." Footsteps coming around the side of the house. The lawyer appeared in view of the window. "Mr. Hale, thank you for communicating. Can we discuss this face-to-face?" "We're discussing it now. I'd prefer to do this properly. May I come in?" "No." He sighed. "Mr. Hale, I'm trying to help you. My clients are willing to be reasonable, but if you insist on being difficult, things will get complicated. This is my property. I decide who comes in, and I'm deciding they don't. Even if that decision has legal consequences?" "What consequences? I own this house. It's paid off. My name is on the deed. I'm not a danger to myself or others. I'm just a man who wants to be left alone in his own home." The lawyer studied me through the window, then nodded slowly. "All right, Mr. Hale. I'll convey that to my clients. But I should warn you, they're not going to let this go. That's their choice. He walked back to where Daniel and Melissa were waiting. More conversation. Melissa's voice rising even from this distance. Daniel shaking his head, the lawyer keeping his hands up in a calming gesture. After several minutes, they got in their cars and left. I closed the window and sat down in the living room. The silence flooded back in, heavy, complete. My phone rang. Officer Grant again. "Mr. Hale, your son's attorney just called the station. They're claiming you're holding personal property hostage and refusing access. There's no property here. He moved out 7 years ago and took everything with him." That's what I figured. I told them that without proof of stored items or a legal residency claim, there's nothing we can do. But I wanted to let you know they're pushing every angle they can think of. I appreciate the heads up. Mr. Hale, off the record, I've seen this kind of thing before. Family disputes that spiral because someone won't let go. My advice? Document everything. Keep records of all communication, and if you feel genuinely threatened or harassed, don't hesitate to file for a restraining order. I thanked him and hung up. The rest of the evening was quiet. No more cars, no more calls, just me and the house and the setting sun. I made dinner, ate it slowly, washed the dishes by hand. Then I sat in the living room and thought about everything that had happened. The birthday without acknowledgement, the request for money, the 1-cent transfer, the changed locks, the escalation, the lawyer, the police, all of it cascading from that single moment when I'd decided I was done being treated like a wallet with no feelings attached. Had I overreacted? Maybe, but I didn't think so. Somewhere along the way, Daniel had forgotten that respect runs both ways, that you can't ignore someone except when you need them, that relationships require maintenance, attention, care. And Melissa, she'd never respected me at all. I was just an obstacle to her, an inconvenient reminder that Daniel had a life before her, someone to be managed, manipulated, or removed. Well, I'd removed myself. I'd drawn the line. And if they wanted to fight about it, let them fight. I had the law on my side, the deed in my name, and the simple, stubborn truth that this was my house and I could do whatever I wanted with it. My phone buzzed. One last text from Daniel. "You're going to regret this." I read it once, then deleted it. Then I turned off my phone, went to bed, and slept better than I had in days. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my door, hard, insistent, angry. I looked at the clock, 6:30. I got up, went to the front window, looked out. 2 police cars were parked in my driveway. 4 officers stood on my porch. Officer Grant was one of them. I opened the door with the chain still on. "Mr. Hale," Officer Grant said. His voice was different now, harder. "We need to speak with you about a formal complaint that's been filed against you." "What complaint?" "Your son has filed charges of elder abuse and financial exploitation. He's claiming you're mentally unwell and making dangerous decisions. He's requested a welfare check and a competency evaluation." My hands went cold. "That's ridiculous. I agree it seems excessive, but we have to follow up on all complaints. I need you to open the door and let us verify your well-being." I looked at the 4 officers, at Officer Grant's steady gaze, at the official nature of this visit. "Mr. Hale, I can get a warrant if necessary, but I'd rather not. Just let us in, let us see you're okay, and we can close this complaint." I took the chain off and opened the door. They came in, all 4 of them, looked around the clean kitchen, the tidy living room, the organized spaces. One officer checked the bathroom, another looked in the bedroom. Officer Grant stayed with me. "Mr. Hale, are you taking any medications?" "Blood pressure medication. That's it." "Do you have any cognitive impairments? Memory issues?" "No." "Have you made any unusual financial decisions recently?" "I sent my son 1 cent instead of $5,500. That's unusual, I suppose, but not impaired." One of the other officers came back. "House is clean, no signs of neglect or unsafe conditions." Officer Grant nodded. "Mr. Hale, I'm going to be straight with you. Your son is trying to build a case that you're incompetent so he can petition for some kind of conservatorship or power of attorney. He's reaching, but he's doing it through official channels, which means we have to respond. What do I need to do? Document everything. Get a lawyer of your own if you can afford one. And most importantly, consider filing a restraining order. This is harassment now. Clear harassment. They left after another 10 minutes of questions and checks. I closed the door behind them and locked it. Then I went to my home office, opened my laptop, and started researching restraining orders. 3 hours later, I'd printed the forms, filled them out, and organized every text message, every call log, every documented interaction from the past week. I put it all in a folder. Then I drove to the courthouse. The clerk looked over my paperwork, asked a few questions, made copies of everything, then told me a hearing would be scheduled within 2 weeks. "Mr. Hale," she said, "this is a temporary restraining order until the hearing. Your son will be served with papers notifying him that he cannot contact you or come within 500 feet of your property until the court makes a final determination. If he violates it, he can be arrested." "Thank you." I drove home and waited. 2 days later, Daniel was served. I knew because my phone, which I'd turned back on, immediately exploded with messages. Rage, disbelief, accusations, threats of what he'd do, what his lawyer would do, how I'd pay for this. I documented every message and forwarded them to the court clerk. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I arrived early, sat in the quiet hallway outside the courtroom, and waited. Daniel showed up with Melissa and the lawyer 10 minutes before the hearing. He saw me sitting there, and his face went red. "You," he said, walking toward me. Melissa grabbed his arm. The lawyer stepped between us. "Mr. Hale," the lawyer said, "we can still settle this. Drop the restraining order and we'll drop the competency petition." "No. Be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. Your client is harassing me. I want it to stop. He's your son. And this is my house, my life, my decision." The courtroom doors opened. A bailiff called our names. We filed in and took our places on opposite sides of the room. The judge was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes. She read through the file quickly, then looked up. "Mr. Daniel Hale, you filed a complaint regarding your father's mental competency. Mr. Robert Hale, you filed for a restraining order against your son. Let's hear the facts." What followed was 90 minutes of testimony. Daniel's lawyer presented their case. The sudden lock change, the refusal to communicate, the 1-cent transaction that they claimed showed impaired judgment. They tried to paint me as confused, isolated, making erratic decisions. Then it was my turn. I presented the text messages. The birthday that was ignored until money was needed. The years of one-sided financial support. The escalating harassment after I said no. The false police reports. The abuse of the legal system to try to bully me into compliance. The judge listened to everything, asked pointed questions, examined the evidence carefully. Then she made her ruling. "Mr. Daniel Hale, your father is clearly competent. He owns his property outright, manages his own affairs, and has made a decision you don't like. That doesn't constitute impairment. Your petition for competency evaluation is denied." Daniel started to speak, but the judge held up a hand. "Furthermore, the evidence clearly shows a pattern of harassment. The restraining order is granted for a period of 1 year. You are not to contact your father directly or indirectly, and you are not to come within 500 feet of his residence. Violation will result in arrest and criminal charges. Do you understand?" Daniel's face had gone white. "Your Honor, he's my father. I have a right—" "You have no rights to another adult's property or person without their consent. This hearing is concluded." The gavel came down. I walked out of the courthouse into bright afternoon sunlight, got in my truck, drove home. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat for a moment with the engine off, looking at my house. The house I'd paid for, the house I'd maintained, the house that was mine. Then I went inside, locked the door behind me, and finally let myself breathe.